Restoration Angel, sweepers, and just general power from those 3 colors. This deck is a bit of a derivative of it, though red appears to only be in the deck for Bonfire and Whip Flare main. There's no creatures. But Blade Splicer, Restoration Angel, Snapcaster Image, Sun Titan creature base, a couple Gideons, and then, you know, variety of both spot removal and sweep.
As we see, Mono Green, in fact, being piloted by Greg Galloway. He starts off with a Glistener Elf. If you've never seen the deck before, that's pretty straightforward. Poison guys and pump. But it is a lot more difficult to play than you probably are thinking it is. So this is one of the matchups that will be interesting. It's not a traditional Delver deck. It's more of a controlling deck that he is playing against, which is favorable for Greg depending on how many gut shots and vapor snags and, you know, the number of things that are looming around in Brian's deck list.
His removal suite is 3 copies of Bonfire of the Dam, 2 Whip Flares, a Day of Judgment, an Oblivion Ring, a Gut Shot, 2 Vapor Snags, and a Dismember. So he has a weird kind of a assortment of different removal spells, and then 4 Ponders to sort of tie the room together.
So I'm interested to see exactly where Greg's going to go here. We see an Inkmoth Nexus in his hand. We can't really make out. Okay, there's a Cathedral Ward as well. No Rancor to go along with this, but in for 2 poison, so he's only got 8 more points left to do. It's kind of like a ticking time bomb, really, when you're playing this. In fact, you got to get your deck online relatively quickly, because if you don't, you're going to die relatively quickly.
Yeah, it's very good at punking people out from very high life totals.
Yes.
Or poison totals, as the case may be.
Taking a look at Greg's hand, I know, as I said, Inkmoth Nexus is hiding there. I believe there's also a Wild Defiance hiding in there as well.
Yep.
Can't really get a good look at some of the other things, but looking at his deck list in front of me, and I can actually make out that front card in his hand due to my limited experience in that format. But the front card in his hand is Hunger of the Howl Pack.
Okay.
And what that is a 1 green instant. You put a +1/+1 counter on your guy, and then Morbid, you get 3 +1/+1 counters instead of just the singular 1. So if a creature were to die, obviously it gets much bigger. As Greg has drawn another Cathedral War.
Yep. I think he's debating between playing that land and playing his Inkmoth Nexus as well.
Yes.
But
this is going to be an attack for 3 poison, which is going to be half of Brian's life total thus far. We'll see if he has any pump, as it looks like he's just passing his turn back.
Yeah, the Evolving Wilds is possibly causing him to act a little more conservatively than he would otherwise, because it just represents some sort of control deck, and you don't want to get, you know, overexposed to a Whip Flare or a similar card that could be lurking. Like if your opponent goes turn 1 Island Ponder, you're probably like, your immediate response is just to assume Delver.
Of course.
But the Evolving Wilds is definitely a tip-off that something else is going on. So now with the amount of damage that's already dealt, this is actually a great position for the Infect deck, because
the Whip Flare that you spoke of.
I mean, he can't let any single threat stick.
And we see another Ponder here.
That's going to show a Whip Flare, a land, and another red card. Is that possibly a Bonfire?
I see. This is where,
or maybe a Gut Shot.
This is where things get kind of interesting for Greg, because that turn he elected to play a.
That's his 1 Gut Shot.
His 1 Gut Shot's in his hand. That turn, Greg elected to play a Cathedral War instead of an Inkmoth Nexus. Now, yes, Brian would be at 1 less poison. He would be at 4 poison instead of 5.
Mm-hmm.
But with him Whip Flaring that Glistener Elf, you know, post combat he could have gone, you know, activate my Nexus and Hunger of the Howl Pack, put 3 +1/+1 counters on my Nexus. So it'll be interesting to see if that decision comes back to bite him. We're going to see him activate the Nexus with the Cathedral War, and we're going to see a Rancor here on it.
So we have a Wild Defiance trigger?
Only instants or sorceries. And we see a Vapor Snag here on the Inkmoth Nexus. Now, I believe Greg played his land.
Yeah, he played it for it, yes.
Yeah, beforehand. So Greg, poor sequencing there, because now he can't play his Inkmoth Nexus and get back to attack him for next turn. He has to wait 2 full turns to be able to do that.
Yeah. Just drew a green Zenith. Green Zenith, not a ton of targets in the Infect deck. It's basically just redundant copies of some of your guys. I assume this is going to be finding Blight Mamba.
I think Blight Mamba would be the best target here.
Yeah, you have 2 mana up to regenerate.
Yeah. I mean, his options for Zenith are 4 Glistener Elf, 1 Blight Mamba, and 1 Viridian Corruptor in his main deck. The thing that makes Zenith kind of unique is the ability to be able to beat someone that is boarding in Malaria against you.
Yes.
That's part of the reason that it is included in the deck, because not only is it, you know, redundant copies of the creatures, so you don't have to play a bunch of them, but it just gives you that flexibility as well of being able to find Viridian Corruptor if you need to be able to deal with the Spell Skite or a Rune Chanter's Pike, or to be able to find Malaria to kill someone else's Malaria.
So there's going to be an end turn Restoration Angel. And I assume that Brian's going to try to find some way to keep a defensive posture here.
He's tapping quickly.
It's a Sun Titan.
Okay. We're going to see him get back.
Evolving Wild.
Okay.
And now he has to hang back on D. I mean, there is a... And this is why the Infect deck is so dangerous. It's like, this is not a safe position.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. You're tapped out like this. Like,
I mean, if he has a Blessing, that's just it, basically.
yeah, that's just, the game is just over if he has Blessing in his hand, and the Gut Shot in Brian's hand has no effect because Wild Defiance is just completely counteracting it. So this turn, Greg was very quick to activate that Inkmoth Nexus, and he is attacking. And I see a Mutagenic Growth.
So that's going to assume this is going to kill the Restoration Angel.
Yeah, that will take care of the Restoration Angel, not only just because of +2/+2, but also because of the Wild Defiance trigger. And so that'll take care of that. We're going to see an Inkmoth, okay, Hunger of the Howlpack with the Morbid trigger on to give it 3 counters.
And those do not go away. Those are on there, even when it converts back to a land.
Correct.
The counters stay on.
And then he's electing not to cast the Acre Claw Mirror this turn.
I would probably just... Acre Claw Mirror's not getting any better.
Yeah, I would have just casted that turn as well. I mean, if he plays something like a Whip Flare or a Day of Judgment to kill... Well, Whip Flare isn't going to kill the Acre Claw Mirror, first of all. If it's Day of Judgment to kill the Blight Mamba and the Acre Claw Mirror, well, then you still have a lethal...
Yeah, you almost certainly win the game if his turn is... If the only thing that he can do is cast Day of Judgment, you almost certainly win the game.
Agreed.
All right, yeah, there's a
that's
concession. He can't handle the Nexus. Hunger of the Howlpack, getting it done.
Taking a look at the deck list here for Greg, sideboarding options. In this kind of matchup, this isn't really a matchup where you're going to find Spellskite to be useful. There's not, from what we saw from Brian's deck, you can kind of tell that it's more of a board control deck than like a spot removal deck.
Yes.
We did see like a Vapor Snag, and I don't know how many copies does he have of that in his deck?
2 copies.
Okay, so there's not a lot of those, and then you said there's only 1 Gut Shot too, right?
Yep.
Okay. From Greg, there's not a lot of cards that I really want to board in, honestly. I mean, I would want an additional possible Blessing, just to be able to get through a Restoration Angel. Potentially Dismember to be able to kill a Restoration Angel.
Yeah, but not a lot. There's not...
I mean, there isn't a lot that I would want to change. It just feels just like a very good matchup for him.
Yeah. On the other side, we have, I mean, not a ton in the way of sideboarding cards. He has another Day of Judgment he can bring in, a Terminus, a Grim Lavamancer is pretty good. He has 1 copy of each of those cards. Negate's okay, but yeah, I mean, there's not a lot going on here.
Yeah, Negate isn't really the way you want to fight against the Poison deck. You have to keep 2 mana up. It only counters like one of their things when they're like kind of moving in.
Yeah.
You know, like it seems like it's like a pretty good answer to Apostle's Blessing, but again, you don't really want to be reactive against them. I don't think that Brian has the tools to be a reactive deck against them like Delver does.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, this matchup just feels quite bad for Weller-Gordan. I mean, he's just like pretty fidgety. He's not particularly good at stopping flyers. Almost everything, most of what his deck is doing is at sorcery speed, so he has to commit on his turn, and all these are not the ways that you want to be able to fight Mono Green Infect.
Yeah.
You need to be able to operate at instant speed. You have to be pretty streamlined. Like, you can't muck around.
Yeah, it's going to be I think it's a very uphill battle for Brian. I mean, being on the play this game is going to help, but I mean, even a card as simple as Inkmoth Nexus. Like, what kind of answers does he have to that? Does he have access to Ghost Quarter anywhere in the 75?
No.
Which, you know, that doesn't surprise me. It seems like it would be hard to do in a 3-color deck.
Yeah, I mean, he's using some colorless land spot on Desolate Lighthouse. Yeah, so basically, that's what he has instead of a Ghost Quarter.
Yeah, just something as simple as Inkmoth Nexus, put a Rancor on an attack. Rancor falls off. All right, do it again next turn. Do it again next turn. Like, that can just straight up beat him.
He has 2 snags, a Dismember, and a Gut Shot as his only ways to stop a Nexus. And I guess Gideon, he has 2 copies of Gideon as well.
Yeah, just the way that Brian's deck list is set up. You know, he has some number of Bonfire of the Dams. He has a couple of Whip Flares. I think he has 2 in his deck list. It's much more set up to be a board control deck that I think would much rather be playing against like Delver.
Yeah, I imagine
or
zombies.
Pod, yeah, like a pod deck.
I assume those matchups are just fine, but his deck is just not well suited up to handle Inkmoth Nexus specifically.
Yeah.
So what do you think of? Greg Galloway's deck has some not traditional numbers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't love his deck list is like a little bit all over the place. Like, there's only 2 Titanic Growths instead of 4. I think Titanic Growth is just like an easy 4 of, just because like it's one card that just cuts their life in half. There are only 3 Rangers. There are Rangers Guiles, period, which a card I'm not that big of a fan of, but there are 3 of those. There's 2 Livewire Lashes in addition to 4 Wild Defiances. I think that Defiance is just a much better effect, especially when your deck has Inkmoth Nexus and Ichorclaw Mirror in it. If people have a card like Shatter and have a card like Smelt, they're going to be boarding in against you anyway, so you don't want to just give them more targets. Like, Livewire Lashes opens you up to like just getting blown out by a Smelt or something like that. Only 2 Missteps when I feel like Misstep is a card that's a 3 or a 4 of in this deck. Assuming that Delver is the deck that you're going to see most in the room. Yeah. And I think that walking into any Star City Games Open, I think you're going to agree that you're going to play against Delver 2 to 3 times in the tournament if you're going to have a successful tournament. And Misstep is at its best against that deck. You're going to want at least 3, potentially 4 of those. There are only 2 Gut Shots. There are only 2 Apostles' Blessing, and then there's the 1 Hunger of the Howl Pack. And while Hunger of the Howl Pack was relatively good that game, I think that you would rather have, you know, a 3rd Mental Misstep, a 3rd Apostle's Blessing, a 3rd Gut Shot before your first Hunger of the Howl Pack.
I also feel like if you're going to play with Hunger of the Howl Pack, then you should be playing with like a bunch of Dismembers, right? Like, his removal suite is such that he can't reliably set up Morbid, like, just off of Gut Shots and stuff like that, right? Like, you would want hard removal to make the Morbid more reliable.
Yes. You know, like, it's one thing to say, well, like, my guy's going to die, so, like, when my guy dies, like, I can just, like, make a bigger guy. But it's not like this deck is full of guys.
Right, yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a realistic approach to be like, well, you're going to kill one of my guys, and then I'm going to make my other guy huge. Yeah. You know, I think that's just, like, a poor strategy. As we see, both players keep 7. Brian's going to lead off with a Ponder. A brief glimpse of Greg's hand. He just did draw a Ranger's Guile, and we do see Glistener Elf start the show off once again.
And Galloway has a Nexus in his hand, which, in our opinion, is definitely the most powerful card that he has.
Absolutely.
In this matchup.
And we're going to lead in for at least 1 poison. It could be Xeno. Oh, he's just going to probably just play Ichorclaw.
Yeah, I like Ichorclaw Mirror a lot better because he knows Whip Flare is a card, so you'd rather lead off with your artifacts than...
And if he does get Whip Flared here, he loses his Glistener Elf. No big deal, but you know, that's Brian's turn. He's going to be still getting in for 1 poison. So
you might just die if you Whip Flare.
Yeah, you can very easily die. That's why that's why this deck is a real thing. Yeah, he may cast Whip Flare this turn and then just die.
Yep.
That's why I'm a big proponent of having at least having the maximum number of Titanic Growths in your deck.
Yeah.
Because it just gives you the ability of, oh, okay, like you did that, all right, like Titanic Growth, Mutagenic Growth, you're dead. Like, you just want to give yourself the opportunity to have a draw like that as often as possible. As we're going to see Blade Splicer.
Very solid here. Not an answer to the Nexus, of course, but certainly not a bad card to have.
You see Defiance in his hand, along with a handful of pump spells.
And Weller-Gordan has Day of Judgment and Gideon in his hand. Okay. So he might be able to actually kind of get to the finish line. Gideon's obviously one of his best answers to what's going on here.
Absolutely. You know, as long as he has the double white to be able to cast it, and we see a Glacial Fortress leaf through his hand. And if I'm Greg in this position, you know, what I would want to do if I'm him right now is, you know, I'm just going to play Wild Defiance and say go, and then I'm just going to move in on my Inkmoth Nexus being the way that I'm going to win this game. You know,
it seems like you had to pick. This has to be your spot where you just land Wild Defiance, right?
Yeah.
Because it shuts off so many, like, all the reasonable answers that that Weller-Gordan could have to Nexus, this almost certainly shuts it off. Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, maybe you get snagged or something like that, but you have Ranger's Guile as backup. In that instance, any sort of dismember slash, gut shot type of answers become a lot worse here. So,
and the thing is, we can see in Brian's hand that there is a dismember over there for him.
Yeah.
And if he were to, let's say Greg's turn, he activates Inkmoth Nexus attack you, and Brian's like, all right, dismember it. Okay, like the trigger goes on for Wild Defiance, and then he's like, all right, Ranger's Galloway.
Yep.
So now it's 2 triggers for Wild Defiance. It makes it a 7. That's +6/+6. Makes it a 7/7. Wild Defiance makes it an 8/8, and we know he has a mutagenic growth. So conceivably, if Dismember goes on to the stag targeting Inkmoth Nexus this turn, he's going to die.
Yeah.
And we'll see if he takes that line of play. And he did draw Spellskite this turn, as we see mutagenic growth.
So it looks
right
like he's
away.
attacking.
And Dismember here, and then Ranger's Guile there, and that should finish it.
That's a wrap.
That's it.
All right.
That easy.
It's just that easy.
Yeah, just that easy. That's why Wild Defiance is completely absurd in that deck.
Yep.
Completely absurd. It blanks so many cards. It basically shuts off like a ton of the spot removal in the format and makes it so that